I'm Dr. Angie Stamm.
And I'm Kaela McGuire.
And this is Integrative Connections, a wellness community for pets and people. I'm a holistic veterinarian with 25 years of experience treating pets with natural modalities. And today's topic is on pet nutrition. We'd like to discuss how to optimize your nutrition for your dog and your cat.
So if your pets are overweight, this is the episode for you.
There is an epidemic of pet obesity in our country right now. And unfortunately, a big part of that is savvy marketing.
I can attest to that. I can see my dog's weight fluctuating based on what I'm feeding him. So the more kibble, the heftier he becomes. And then the more like raw freeze-dried diet, the slimmer and more healthy. And even his coat, I can tell with how shiny his coat is too.
Absolutely. The dry food is more processed and tends to have much higher carb content than what is biologically appropriate. What happens is you get continual inflammation, increased insulin resistance, and more joint issues, more digestive issues, more skin issues. So it's really a big problem. Certainly feeding a 100% fresh diet to every pet is not within everyone's budget.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about some practical things that we can do to, at least hedge that gap a little bit.
And I feel like this topic is becoming more popular and there's an awareness that's growing because there's so many more options now than there were even 5 years ago. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of balanced commercial brands that are not kibble, that essentially that are low heat processed, less carbs than what's, more biologically appropriate levels of carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can really see when an animal walks in a room, what they're eating. I can tell from across the room if they're on kibble or a fresh diet. The dogs that are on kibble, especially low quality kibble, and they're not getting any fresh food, they tend to be what I call have kibble bloat, which is just this kind of, they're just overweight, their coats are dull, they are lethargic, they just don't look vibrant and healthy.
I mean, the through line is diet with people as well. Like I can tell when I'm not eating whole foods and cooking from home, like the more I eat out, the bigger I get, It's just convenience versus taking time to really care for your body and your diet. And same goes for your babies.
Absolutely.
And my dog definitely takes precedence.
It doesn't have to be an either or situation. It's just like us 80-20 rule, right? Yeah. Try to do the best you can within your budget and your lifestyle. And maybe we don't have to feed a mono diet to these animals, right? In fact, the gut microbiome probably thrives with more diversity. So if you just feed one brand of kibble for years and years, that's probably doing a disservice not only to their general levels of inflammation, but also to their gut microbiome diversity. So to the extent that they tolerate it, a varied diet is probably a good thing we're learning.
Yeah. Last episode, you mentioned adding sardines and liver. And so I bought some sardines for Darsh. And now he's a punk. He won't eat his food unless there's sardines in there. So I wanted to ask, what is the serving size? Asking for a friend.
Well, that's going to depend on their size and certainly what else they're eating. And there's probably a range there. But for a small to medium dog, a few sardines a week is probably the small.
Oh, a week. Sorry, dude. So a can should last a week.
I mean, for a small dog, yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Depending on
we started off strong.
Yeah. Whether I'm using Western medications, herbs, chiropractic, or acupuncture, whatever modalities that I'm using on the pets, if they don't have a solid nutrition foundation, they're not going to respond as well to those other therapies. So that really is the foundation of what I try to stress for my clients is put, if the funds are limited, the budget is limited, and you're really trying to keep your animal healthy, put it all into the best food that you can feed.
Okay. And that's preventative for down the road. That's what you're saying. Yeah,
exactly. Less vet costs, right? For GI things and skin things and less arthritis down the road.
Yeah.
If you try to feed the most anti-inflammatory diet that you can.
And then as far as skin, I know we've talked a lot about chicken. Is this little guy an exception, or have you seen more cases where skin flares up due to chicken or turkey or birds?
Chicken in particular, I do see a lot of problems with it, and skin issues, digestive issues, primarily. And so that's one of the things I'll eliminate if I'm seeing those problems,
for the elimination diet.
Exactly. Yeah. And unfortunately, chicken, because it's so inexpensive, it's shoved into a lot of the less expensive foods as a secondary filler.
Yeah.
Even though the bag may say it's a salmon formula or, something of this nature, always check the label to see if they've snuck chicken in there. The problem with chicken is that the commercial factory chicken is fed high amounts of GMO corn and soy, which is very high in glyphosate and super inflammatory. So that passes through to the meat, and that creates a lot of inflammation.
My mom will go to the butcher and buy liver and chop it up and just put a few slices on her dog's food. Is that something that you should offer regularly, or switch that up with kidneys or heart? Or
you can use liver. If you think about if a dog or cat were to eat a whole animal, there's a lot. The percentage of the animal that's organs is a lot.
Right.
If you include brain and skin, because skin is an organ too.
True.
Right. So an ancestral diet is fairly high in organ meat as a ratio to bone and muscle meat.
Interesting.
So liver is a good one. But yes, it's good to get some other organs in there too.
Just switch it up.
If you can get heart, if you can get kidney, those are the main ones that you can obviously source easily.
Okay. Yeah. And Vital Essentials is the brand that I really like. They have, and chicken hearts are the only hearts that they offer. Is that gonna trigger the same skin issues that eating chicken breast would trigger? Because I stopped getting the chicken heart when he started having allergy to chicken breast. It
could, because the heart is a muscle. So it's got the same antigenic look to the body than a muscle, old chicken thigh or a breast would. So I would be careful with that.
Okay.
We use a lot of Primal at our hospital. They're local, out of California.
I've been giving him kibble in the raw.
They have a new kibble in the raw, which is a lower price point than the full raw. They use steamed sorghum is the only heat processed portion of that to bind it and to keep the price point down. So you're getting some carbs, but it's a pretty clean carb. I find that my animals gain a little more weight on that than they will the raw. So if you have an animal that's having difficulty gaining weight on pure raw or all fresh, then that might be something that you could add in. That's not a kibble per se.
Okay.
I like the Dr. Harvey's mixes. I do a lot of cancer treatments with the Paradigm, which is their ketogenic vegetable base, and then clients can add their own cooked meat to that and have a fairly balanced homemade diet that's low in carbs, anti-inflammatory.
Awesome. And we have your recommendations list, which we'll be adding to the website. So people can just click and buy, and it's categorized by cats and dogs. The next question is protein. I know adults can get too much protein. Is that same with pets as well?
It depends. It depends on the breed, their health status, whether they have liver or kidney challenges. But in general, a healthy dog or cat, especially a cat, which is an obligate carnivore, should be eating a very high protein diet.
Okay.
And they're just, cats don't even have the enzymes in their mouth to break down starches. And then we're feeding them these kibbles with rice or oat or something like that. And they can't process it. It creates inflammation. They gain weight. They become insulin resistant. They get diabetes. They get arthritis. They get bowel disease. So it's a real problem.
How often do you see diabetes in pets?
It's actually fairly common. Cats tend to get probably a little bit more frequently than dogs, but we see it frequently, somewhat frequently in both, especially in animals that have been overweight for a long time.
Gotcha.
So it's similar to type 2 diabetes in people, where it's an insulin resistance problem. But if you catch it kind of in the earlier stages and you change the diet to more of a ketogenic, fresh diet, that tends to avoid that problem from occurring.
So when you say give a variety, what is just a standard diet that you would give just anybody on the street, not a case-by-case basis?
It depends on, again, the dog, the owner's budget and lifestyle, where they live, what they have access to. Maybe you use a base of a couple of different kinds of good quality dry foods, and you change up the proteins and change up the brands.
Gotcha.
And then you can use less of that and then work in some like a commercially balanced fresh diet, either cooked or pasteurized raw, balanced diet, and do less of the kibble. There's also some dehydrated diets that you add water to and reconstitute, that some of which have meat already, the protein already in it.
Oh, nice.
Some of which are like a base mix that you can add the protein to.
Nice.
So some people like to travel a lot, so they don't want to have a freezer full of food. They want something that's shelf stable.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on the owner's budget, lifestyle, and if they're traveling a lot, that sort of thing.
And what about puppies?
Puppies in general, you know, a lot of the newer commercial diets are balanced for all life stages. So the kibbles that are marketed for puppies tend to be a little bit more nutrient dense, but they're not always needed. I find, especially if it's a biologically appropriate formula. They're kind of for all life stages. So it's a bit of a marketing
Interesting.
issue. Yeah.
And senior diets too?
Correct. Yeah. Senior diets are usually, historically have been restricted in protein, which is not necessarily a good thing.
Wow. So when you go to the pet store and you ask the kid working, what food should I give my pet? What are your opinions about what we're typically told?
I mean, again, that's going to vary, but in general, I would talk to your integrative holistic veterinarian rather than somebody who's working at the retail store. But a lot of times they do just kind of go by what they're told from the different manufacturers on how to market these foods. And
that's what I would imagine.
Yeah. In addition to the high carbohydrate content in a lot of the dry foods, which promotes insulin resistance and inflammation, these foods are cooked at a very high temperature, extrusion process, which we know from studying human nutrition, when you cook foods at a high temperature, you create oxidation. It's called glycation end products, or advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These are very highly oxidative to the body, which means that they create a lot of inflammation and they age the body prematurely.
Wow. That's
so
good
the less you can heat the food, the better. So either raw, or if the animal doesn't tolerate raw, go to a low heat cooked kibble, or a lightly cooked food, home cooked food. And if you're home cooking, a crock pot is the ideal way to
that's easy.
Cook the food.
Yeah.
Because it cooks at a lower temperature. Same thing for us. You know, if you can cook in the crock pot, that's better than throwing a steak on the grill at 500 and searing and getting the char, which is super carcinogenic. Yeah.
Yeah. I recently saw that it's not healthy to feed your pets cold food.
Yeah, anything cold in nature, like it's the same thing for us. If you're eating a lot of cold drinks or smoothies, that could stagnate the digestion, the blood vessels in the upper digestive tract, and actually hinder the digestive process.
That's like Ayurvedic medicine.
Correct. Ayurvedic, TCM.
Okay. What's TCM?
Traditional Chinese medicine.
Okay.
Yeah. So they knew, the ancients knew that feeding cold food is not necessarily a good thing.
Because it shocks the system, I would imagine. Yeah, and it has to work harder.
Vasoconstricts the blood vessels in the digestive tract. So if you are feeding a commercial raw diet, which obviously come frozen,
right?
There are freeze-dried versions, but if you buy the frozen version, you'll want to defrost it. And then what I recommend is letting it sit out for an hour or two till it warms out, or pour a little bit of hot or boiling water on it so it kind of is at least at room temperature when you're feeding it.
Okay. And I was just thinking about his wet food. I get the large can, so obviously don't feed all that at once. So the rest goes in the fridge. So I should let it sit out before I refeed.
Ideally.
Okay.
Or add a little warm water to it.
Okay.
Or broth or warm goat smoke, something like that.
Or like a double boiler, just to okay.
If you want to get really fancy.
Wow.
Or you could sous vide. Yeah. The other problem with kibble is that, so there's like the whole grain or no grain debate, and originally kibbles were made with grains, typically the old school kibbles that, have been around forever, corn, wheat, whatever, the big ag subsidized that was cheap and it's full of Roundup and GMOs, inflammatory. And so dogs are having problems with that. People realized, well, if we take the grains out, they have less skin issues. Well, duh, yeah, you take out corn and soy and wheat, and lo and behold, they have less skin issues. But we have to replace it with something starchy to bind it.
Right.
So what are we going to use? Well, let's use some legumes. How about some chickpeas or lentils or peas? Well, guess what? Those have anti-nutrients too, and they are also heavily sprayed with glyphosate, so they're not great either. You don't see dogs mowing down a field of chickpeas.
Right.
So those can be problematic as well.
Interesting.
So I think the least offensive starch in a kibble, in my opinion, would probably be white rice.
Interesting. Okay. What about brown rice?
Brown rice has more toxins.
Wow.
Yeah, because you don't remove the outer shell, so it's higher in metals and anti-nutrients.
I always thought brown was the healthier.
White rice.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
Organic white rice. You can make a homemade diet that's balanced with all whole foods, but you need to work with a formulator. And it's probably going to need to include some form of bone or mineral source like eggshells, and some organs, because organs are really the nutritional powerhouse. They are very nutrient dense. They have a lot more vitamins and minerals than muscle meat.
Okay. And you can buy those freeze dried. I mean, liver, kidneys,
You can get
he
it all.
has them. Yeah.
You can even buy powdered grass-fed organs that you just throw in there.
Okay.
Not even chunky, just already freeze-dried powder.
Yeah. If people are local, they can come to you at Meridian and have a consultation. Absolutely. And get a custom diet. And then if people aren't local, they can do it.
Telemedicine?
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep, we do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So sadly for the veterinarians, in vet school, we're really not trained in optimal nutrition. Our learning is heavily subsidized by the big pharma pet food companies who will sponsor talks about their products. You don't have to do any thinking on your own. If you have kidney disease, you feed this bag. If you have liver disease, you feed this bag. Here's some pizza. Here's some soda. See you later.
Oh, wow.
So it's unfortunate that the veterinarians at an early age are kind of brainwashed into going this direction on recommendations because they don't know anything else.
They have to seek out the additional information, and they have to know to seek that out.
And they have the science. The big pharma companies have science, and they have the white papers to back that their foods are balanced and nutritionally complete and effective. And maybe they are. I mean, they're fine, but are they optimal?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Wow.
They can live on them. They can do okay. They're not unbalanced diets, but are they really anti-inflammatory? Are they really pro-longevity?
I was going to say, that's
right?
probably why
really
we see cancer a lot earlier.
Are we really optimizing their health with those diets?
Interesting.
One of my first experiences in nutrition in a clinical setting and in kind of seeing this effect of kibble versus fresh food was I had a client that brought me a cat that was vomiting, and it had been on a dry kibble of chicken and corn-based dry kibble, which is very classic. And the cat was vomiting, and I had just come back from a holistic conference where I had gotten a sample of a food called sojos, which is a dehydrated.
Oh, I know sojos.
That you reconstitute, and it has the meat already in it. So I gave them the sample and said, try this. Lo and behold, they reported back 2 weeks later, cat stopped vomiting.
No.
Wow, so easy. No, I wish it was always that easy, but that was my first really great response to diet change, and it's so exciting to be able to make that much difference with just a diet switch.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. Was that one of the original brands that came out with like a premix?
Sojos was one of the early fresh commercial diets.
Because I remember not seeing anything like it, and I got a sample from someone, and shocked he loved it.
Yeah. Another big component to a healthy diet for pets is healthy fats. Just like us, we shouldn't be feeding them rancid, highly processed seed oils. And if you look at most of these big commercial kibbles, guess what they have in them? Soy oil, vegetable oil,
hydrogenated oil.
It's high heat processed, so it's highly oxidized. It's been sitting in a bag for months and months at God knows, some warehouse.
Yeah.
And I mean, talk about oxidation, stress.
Right.
Terrible. So with these lower heat processed fresh diets, you're not getting that. And the good companies are putting in, it's basically just animal fat. It's the whatever fat is coming from that meat, which is how they should be eating. If you want to supplement with additional fats, depending on their condition, fish oils, always a good choice, or algae-based oils. Olive oil, coconut oil are fine.
Okay.
Ghee is great. It's a superfood, high in vitamins A and K. But absolutely no highly processed vegetables or seed oils.
And how much oil would you put on? Like, is it a drizzle? I can imagine that would create some diarrhea.
Yeah, you really have to take it on a case-by-case basis, depending on what else you're feeding, what conditions you're treating, what the animal's health history is. But like a 100-pound German Shepherd, where you're trying to treat arthritis and really get the omega-3 levels up, that dog might take an additional 4 teaspoons a day of fish oil if it tolerates it.
Right. Okay. And then I was just thinking about like colloidal silver. Is that a supplement or is that a case-by-case basis? Like,
colloidal silver is kind of like a natural antibiotic in a sense.
Okay.
It can be used topically in the eyes, or taken orally. But a lot of people think that it's not something that you want to take long term. You would use it more like you would use an antibiotic.
Got it. For some reason that just popped in. So I wanted to ask while I was thinking about it. And when you say topically, is that for like a skin wound or, I mean, you mentioned the eye.
You can use it like a Neosporin, like you would for a Neosporin.
Oh, that's
if you
pretty
have little conjunctivitis, you could use it in the eye. Basically cuts and topical skin infections.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
Talk about, back to Chinese medicine, the elements. Mm-hmm. I don't know much about that, and you've mentioned it in passing.
In traditional Chinese medicine, food therapy, certain meats, or certain foods, vegetables and meats are either warming, neutral, or cooling to the body. So if you have an animal that runs hot, pants a lot, doesn't like to go lay in the sun, you probably shouldn't feed that animal a lot of the warmer meats, which would be venison, lamb, the heavy red meats.
Okay.
Those are warming to the body. And so that's going to exacerbate that animal's constitution and could create more inflammation. If you have an animal that runs cold, then those meats would be balancing for that animal's constitution. Vice versa, if you have an animal that runs cold, probably don't feed pork, rabbit, duck.
Fish.
White fish is cooling to the body. Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting because I mentioned in our first episode when I was first introduced to holistic modalities and things, the lady that I worked with, she has a double master's in Chinese medicine. And so she would always tell me that I run hot, shocking, and I need to eat more cooling foods. Mm-hmm. So this is like total full circle moment that, oh wow, my dog runs hot too.
Watermelon, fish, lettuce, things like that. Yeah. Think about what you would crave on a hot day versus what you would crave on a cold day. On a cold day, you're making your stews with your sweet potatoes and your beef.
That's a good way to look at it. And
in the summer, you're craving salad and fish,
crispy vegetables.
Light, watermelon, things like that.
Okay.
Another thing that I think gets overlooked a lot for pets is the water quality. Mm-hmm. I try to remember to remind clients of this, but probably it's not great to feed them tap water. Especially if it's not dechlorinated, it's got fluoride or chlorine in it. Those are super toxic. And who knows what else is in tap water, right? All kinds of pharmaceuticals and hormones and all kinds of things. So ideally, spring water that's been filtered or reverse osmosis would be best, just like for us. Yeah. People don't think about it for their pets.
A lot of times the tear stains will go away if you give them filtered water. Yeah. Do you see that?
I have seen that.
Yeah. Because that happened recently with a friend. She was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. And then sure enough, it helped.
Yeah.
Changing the water every day. Some other people I've noticed will only change the water when the water bowl is empty. And it's like, they need fresh water every day.
Oh, yeah.
Would you want to drink the same water out of, you know, every...
Yeah. It gets a slime.
Yeah.
They won't drink
and
as
clean
well.
the bowl. And yeah, they're not drinking it. And listening to the pets, like they're communicating with you. If they're panting and they have a full bowl of water, maybe you need to give them fresh water, and then they'll gulp it down because that's all they wanted was a glass of fresh water, just like you probably would.
My husband's dog is a water snob. She won't, like, if we're somewhere where all we have is tap water, she won't drink it. She'll be like, what is that?
That's hilarious.
Not drinking that.
I love that. And touching on animal communication just briefly, I was listening to a podcast today and it's all about telepathy, and there was an episode about horses, and this woman, she was like professional jumper. I know that you'll appreciate this being an equestrian. There's this horse that did really well with other riders, but he would not jump with her. And so she called in an animal intuitive, and the horse wouldn't jump with her because she had so much inflammation in her body.
Whoa.
The horse didn't want to hurt her.
Oh my God.
So as soon as she healed, and then she got I have chills, and then she got a prescription, and the horse told the intuitive that's not the right prescription for her.
Whoa.
And then when she got the right prescription and healed, the horse started, and they started winning. Wow. Isn't that amazing?
That is cool.
So pets will communicate, and they're not just being stubborn.
They're super intuitive. I think that, like, going back to the feeding variety point, what I find is cats especially are kind of picky, or dogs will do this too. They'll eat one food for a while, but if you keep feeding them the same food for a while, they'll kind of like get sick of it. They want, they're telling you, hello, like, I need some variety here.
Yep, absolutely.
One of the questions I get asked when I suggest that my clients take their pets off of kibble, sometimes is, well, how are they going to clean their teeth?
Oh, interesting. I can
Which
see
is
that,
totally a myth and not true at all. That'd be like, here, Kaela, eat this crispy cookie and your teeth will be clean. Like,
wow,
makes no sense, right?
Right. But it's marketing.
But it's good marketing. When the pets are on a fresh or raw diet, it actually changes their oral microbiome such that they tend to make less plaque and tartar.
Okay. So they don't have that need. And what about antlers? I've heard that those are good for cleaning teeth, now that we're on the topic.
Antlers are super hard, so I've had a lot of dogs break teeth on those. So if you have a very aggressive chewer, or a dog bigger than 20 pounds that has enough bite force to really gnaw on that hard, they can break teeth. So I'd be very cautious with those.
Okay.
I think that raw bones for certain animals can be good. I regularly recommend raw chicken feet as sort of nature's greenie, if you will, right? The greenies are super, super bad. Like,
yeah, I would imagine
starch and low quality processed ingredients, and they don't really do much to clean their teeth, in my opinion. But the chicken foot, if they're not allergic to chicken, would be an option. Okay. And you can even feed them frozen. Okay. And raw, and they'll be a little crispier, and they'll kind of knock off some of that tartar pretty well. A lot of people feel comfortable doing raw poultry necks, chicken or turkey necks. Okay. And those bones, again, are very small, so they're not, and then when they're raw, they're not going to splinter and cause a problem. And some people even do the raw marrow bones, the beef marrow bones, for exercise and nutrition and teeth cleaning. You just have to be careful with those. If you have a dog with a very strong jaw, or they are an aggressive chewer, they can break their teeth on those marrow bones.
And I imagine those have a lot of really good minerals too.
Minerals, right? And the bone marrow is super nutrient dense. So it is kind of a superfood. Right. I'm just thinking like bone broth. Yeah. And everything. Yeah, they're getting the minerals. Yeah. And they're getting the connective tissue on the outside, which is collagen. Mm-hmm. Speaking of bone broth, is that good for dogs? Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Bone broth is superfood just like for us. And it's super inexpensive to make. Mm-hmm. Just don't put a lot of onions in it, and then you're fine. Right. Yeah, you can use garlic. Garlic's not toxic to animals like we were told. I just recently learned that. Why did we always think that garlic was toxic? I think I don't know where that got started, but they are in the onion family, and onions are toxic, so... Okay. I think in very, very high doses they are. Garlic is. But the amount you'd put in bone broth, should be just fine. And xylitol is now being renamed birch sugar or something like that. And that's very super toxic. Yes. Yeah. Very toxic. Grapes and raisins, chocolate, onions, those are the main ones. One of the things to look out for in a commercial diet, particularly kibble, would be nightshades. So potatoes, primarily it's going to be white potatoes. that you're going to see in the kibbles, those for certain animals can be really inflammatory, especially for joints.
Okay.
So if you have a dog with arthritis and you're feeding, say you're going to feed a kibble, a little bit of kibble, maybe avoid the potato base.
Okay. Because potato is a
nightshade,
but it's a common ingredient in
a lot of foods.
Yeah. Okay. That's what you're saying. That's your whole point.
And it's a high glycemic index.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you have a nutrition guide.
We're continually reviewing commercial foods and updating that. So if people want just a little more confidence in selecting some brands, that's a resource that we can offer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode.